Hi everyone and welcome to a new Wargame video. Today I'm going to be making a South Africa Motorized deck because I've been playing South Africa on and off quite a bit, but it's just been a general deck, and in my efforts to try and make more focused decks with a specialization, this just seemed the logical next step because of the way I've been playing South Africa. I haven't been really calling in their tanks very much. I've been on and off calling in aircraft, but not too much. It's mostly been an infantry focus. So that's the route I'm going to go down. There's a really good video that Razzman's just put up as well, which he ranks all of the South Africa units. He is someone who knows a lot more about the game than me, is much better at the game than me. So if you're looking for details on every single unit, check out his video, I'll link it below. Otherwise, this is basically what I'm building for 10v10 tacticals. It's going to be focused obviously then on high quality, high veterancy units. However, it could be easily adapted for games where you just want lower veterancy and more of said units. So, let's go straight into logistics. Command helicopters, big no-no for me. I get command helicopters killed, I get infantry in helicopters, or command infantry in helicopters killed way too often, so that's a no-go. I'm going to take command infantry, because that always works for me. I'm going to take these guys in the Caspian Mark II. The reason for that is more than anything else the fact that it has an extra top armor, so it just provides it a little bit more defense. You could go a little bit more expensive for like a K car or something and have a little bit of firepower or a Ratel 20, but realistically you're not going to leave the vehicle near that unit. Most of the time they're going to be sat in a building and you want to move the vehicle away, so I'll just go with cheap option. 4 trained. If this was not a 10v10 tactical, then I would want more than 4 command. The commanders, if you're in a normal game, and especially if it's like a 4v4 or 2v2 or 1v1, you're going to need loads of them because you're going to lose them and you're going to want to recap points. In a 10v10 you've got 10 people with 4. That's 40. And some people bring more than that, so I never feel that I need more than just 1 card basically. Options wise though, if you were doing that, you can also consider the vehicles, and when you're considering vehicles, then you know, rovers and buffles, they come in with 7 trained. For me, I'd get the buffle just because it's got a little bit of armor. Speed's not too dissimilar, a little bit bigger in size, but for me I'd probably go with the buffle. Ratel BV, meh, nothing special. Anyhow, take a fob, because a fob. Chopper, because a chopper, and I don't call them in very often, but the reality is when the fob's empty and I've got points to spare, it's going to be a chopper I bring in to rearm, I don't know, or resupply I should say, my artillery, my troops on the front line, if I can get it close enough without it getting blown up. I'm going to take the Samuel 100 cargo. You only get 6 of these and they're expensive. They're very fast. They're a great unit, but I always find myself in a situation where once I get to 40 points, I'm wanting to call in a squad of infantry. I have extra space here, and I've got up to 60 points to play with. So I'm actually going to add the cheap ones. They're not as cost effective by any means, they're a lot slower. However, when I'm sat desperately needing supply, and I don't have 40 points in these matches because it's low income, I'm going to be able to call one of these in. And you know, yes, it's only 500 supply, and yes, it's slow, but in the situations that I want to call these in, that doesn't matter. It's to rearm some infantry or something like that, or resupply them, you know? Fine. Infantry. Loads of room to play here. We're going to fill all of it. B10 uniter, not even getting a look in. Bocops, decent infantry, regular troops, nothing too special, cheap and cheerful. Bocop 90s on the other hand, yes please. We'll pin them both. The main thing here is obviously, guns wise, the Bocops Vector R1 looks better on the face of it, but the stabilizer's better on the Vector R4. It's also got a much higher rate of fire, but the big thing here is the rocket launcher, or the missile launcher. You know, got an FT5 or it's an FT5, isn't it? That does a lot more damage. Look at the AP power on that. Look at the accuracy. For me, they're just a better unit. And you can bring them in a Rattle 20, which is exactly what I want. So, Buck Up 90s, Rattle 20, Veterans. Done and dusted. Moving on. There are other units which are very good. I'm just putting those in there for the moment because they use a Rattle 20 for a start, and the Rattle 20 is fantastic. The gun on it, that's the Star Wars gun. Pew 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 lasers. Can't go wrong. But not many of the infantry get access to it. Buffaloes, I wouldn't touch the normal Buffaloes. The Buffalo 85s have got me out of so many nasty situations. They're a shock team, strength 15, they cost 35 points, they're not cheap, but they have Milans, they have absolutely devastated enemy forces for me. They're not the best at anti-infantry, but their additional strength, so 15-man squad, makes a huge difference. Vehicle-wise, I mean, you can't go wrong with a cheap option, but I'm going to bring in the K-car. I've never really used the K-car, but, you know, it does have a little autocannon on it. So I'm going to go with that. Veterans or elites? Veterans, because I tend to call in a lot of these guys. And I think that's... Is that good enough? Do you go for the extra accuracy? I'm debating now. Plus 32% accuracy, plus 24%. Faster morale recovery, more chances to see and identify enemy units. I'm not really bothered about that. Stun effect duration. Let's go with veteran because that's 4 extra squads and I do tend to go through them even in 10v10 tacticals. Moving on. Burgmag, no. Inflict. So I quite like the Inflict. Sometimes they have really saved my bacon because they do output a lot of damage at a good range. Other times they've missed every shot and have been absolutely useless. So there are situations where they've been fantastic and situations where I just wish I hadn't bothered. I'm going to stick them in. I'm going to take them in the K-car. It makes them a little bit more expensive. But I feel like at least then I can use the vehicle with an autocannon. Don't get me wrong, machine guns are good as well, but autocannon, at least I can flit around to do other things. 10 veterans is absolutely fine. Milans. You've got the Buffalo with the Milan, but the Milans are much cheaper. The Buffaloes aren't always necessarily going to be something you want to stick in a defensive location in a town. The Milans certainly are. And they can come in a Rattle 20. And a Rattle 20 Milan, which seems a bit silly to be fair. I'd bring them in a Rattle 20, drop them off in whatever building they're going to be in, and shift the Rattle 20 to the front line to assist other troops. That's just because I want more Rattle 20s on the field, because of how useful they have been. I will stress at this point, I haven't actually had them in my other deck, they've just devastated me. So, yeah. Parabats, shock troops, not the cheapest troops in the game by any means, but good overall. The mini SS machine gun, it's a decent squad. You can get elites. Do you bring them in the K-car? Probably not. Bring them in something cheaper. Do you bring them in a Buffalo or... Just to keep the cost down to 35 instead of bumping it all the way up to 40. I'm tempted to go to Casper just for the top armor. Provide a little bit of extra defense for them. It's the same price. 10 elite. Because nothing wrong with elite shock troops. Sappers, they're sappers. I don't use them very much. They have their advantages. Each to their own on sappers. They can be very annoying when you're up against them, but equally, they're not great. SASF, 90 variant, yes. Standard variant, not really. Look at the difference between them. Let's pin them. Because the SASF 90s, they're great at anti-infantry, within reason. They're great at anti-tank, and they're great at anti-air. These guys have got me out of many sticky situations, very sticky situations in some circumstances. When nothing else has been there for air defense, they are very accurate for, you know, what they are. So we will take those guys. What you take them in with, do you keep the cost down and make them 45, or do you just go the full hog and go 50? I'd consider bringing them in a chopper, but I don't think it's worth it. I'm tempted to bring them in the K car, because you're going to be using them aggressively sometimes, and they don't have their own machine gun, which equally means that, you know, a twin machine gun on a Casper or a Buffalo is pretty good. But I think it's tempting to bring in the K car. I stress again, I haven't used the K car. This might all blow up in my face. Maybe they're terrible compared to the Ratel 20s, but their stats aren't too dissimilar. I don't think they're not as good, obviously, but they're not too dissimilar. And I'm accepting that this is putting the price of my units up quite a bit. And then Stingers, do you bring them in? I think there's times when I bring in Stingers and things, man-pads, just to stick them in a forest and provide a little bit of harassment to enemy choppers or enemy aircraft that fly over. And I have been playing my South Africa standard deck and wish they were in there. So I am going to take some. I'm just going to take them in a Buffalo. They don't need to be anything exciting. It just needs to get there. Veterans, hardened veterans. It doesn't really make much difference. I'm happy enough with that. The only thing I might change is the inflict and bring in maybe some bulk ops, just because they're nice and cheap. Let's move on to support. Now, you can debate with me about this one, and they both have their advantages. Cactus 60, Cactus SAHV. The SAHV is fire and forget. It's got a little bit better range, a tiny bit better accuracy, otherwise pretty similar. Reload time's a little bit higher. Each their own here. I'm going to bring in the Ruicat as well. So I'd rather have something cheap as an option to bring in. So I'm going to bring in the Cactus, I'm going to bring in 5 hardened ones. I'm going to bring the Ruicat. It's radar, but it's very, very fast. 120 kilometers off-road. That's ridiculous. You can just reverse this thing out of the way or drive it forward out of the way of incoming artillery shots, mortars, bombs from planes. This thing can outrun the bombs from Nighthawks and stuff if you're paying attention. So, 4 hardened of those, no questions asked. Ratel, 120, Ratel 81. The Elan 60, I'm not even going to bother with. The 81, it's got an 81mm round. Is it worth it? It's half the price. But I just think for the additional HE power, the suppression power, if you're going to bring them in, you might as well spend the extra, get 4 hardened of those in the deck. This is what you want for clearing towns at the end of the day, or, you know, doing some damage to a little tree line. Rocket stuff? I mean, again, I'm not a big fan of rocket artillery. It drains fobs. Cluster munitions ones, the Smirch is great, but I've never had much luck with anything else. And I know some people manage to somehow get amazing kills with them, but I just never have enough to want to bring it in. I took the Rhino in the other deck, but I've rarely called it in. It's super accurate, it's great for clearing buildings even because of how accurate it is, and nothing else in the game really compares. Valkyrie, I don't know, it's standard launcher really. HE power 7's pretty good. Suppression, and then you got the Rover, which is napalm. Good for panicking, good for putting down smoke effectively, because people can't see through it. I don't know. I'm kind of tempted just to stick the Rhino in there again, because it's good enough for me. Problem is, it's 2 trained on 1 veteran. So you're not got much to play with there. Not that I'd be calling it in very much, to be honest. I mean, the Rover's tempting just to be a little bit of harassment. I only get 16 rounds, though. That gets 24. 60 points. I mean, I really don't know. I've not tried them. I should probably try them in a game of a CI or something to see what they're like. Let's stick the Valkyrie in. I don't think it's going to do... Or the Rover. I'm not going to bring in the Rhino. I think have I brought it in once, maybe? I usually rely on other people in these games because other people like to bring in artillery and just sit back and do that. Out of these two, what's going to be the best support for my troops on the front line? They're both going to provide good panic. I'm tempted to try the Valkyrie. Let's add the Valkyrie. I'll probably regret it. And then Razzman in his video, which again I have a link below, really recommends the Bosvark for a little cheap defensive unit for around the base and the size of the map and things like that. It's nice and fast. I have no experience with these two. I did bring the Rui Cat before, but I think maybe it's too expensive for what it is, especially when you've got these here. Its range isn't exactly great against anything. Good accuracy though. I think it's usually compared to a Jeopard, and I think the Jeopard's slightly better in terms of its pricing and stuff. Don't quote me on that, I'm not an expert. So Bosvark, I'm going to take 14 trained of those. Nice and straightforward there, other than the artillery piece. But tanks, cheap, almost identical, except the gun. What I actually want here is the 60.1. You've got not a lot of choice, obviously, because it's a motorized deck. I think the Elephant Mark 1B is great. 10 hardened. I'm not going to call in more than 10 of these in a 10v10 tactical match. I've never done that. If they die, they die. They're there to provide a little bit of armor support for the troops. You're not going to like drive them into the enemy, but they're good in like a tree line. The other thing that's really good, and you only get one of them sadly, the Rui Cat 105. Good HE power, good AP power, very good stabilizer, very good accuracy. 12 hardened of those. Done and dusted. The Rui Cat 76 Mark 1C is the other little option there. Again, good accuracy, stabilizer. Some people use these to very good effect. I've never had that much luck with them, to be honest. I'd rather take the bigger cannon. I'm going to leave that as is for now and come back, but I don't think I'll necessarily take anything else there. Recon. Now, you can play around with this as you see fit. You got the Alouette, which is one option for air. I'm very bad with air recon. I tend to forget about them and end up getting them killed. They're cheap though. I'm tempted by this one though, which I've never used, but it has a GA1, AP power 2, autocannon. And where is it? It's on the front there. Let's turn it around. I don't think it's static. I think it can turn. Don't quote me on that. Maybe it is static. That's something that makes a difference with all of these choppers, is whether the gun can turn. But, you know, on the off chance you fly over near behind an enemy base or something and come across a slightly armoured APC in terms of, you know, a command vehicle or something, this might have a chance of killing it. So I'm going to stick that in there. Veteran, just because it makes the gun a bit better. In terms of the vehicles, in a 90, I'm not really bothered about any of these. The only one I'm interested in is the Rui Cat 76 because it's got very good optics. And take 5 Veteran because Veteran, remember, veterancy makes a difference on recon and scouting and stealth. So, you know, for recon units, veterancy is important. See there, 15% chance to see and identify enemy units. So get the highest rank you can. Pathfinders, well, again, you know, depends on your point of view whether trackers are more useful than parapathfinders. I like parapathfinders because I can use them as infantry. The frag grenade launcher has got me out of so many sticky situations, so I'm going to take those guys. I'm going to take them in the Casper K car. No, I'm not. I'm out of Casper K cars. Interesting. Do I do them in the Casper Mark II then? That's interesting. Why am I out of K cars? What have I taken else in K cars? I've taken loads of infantry and K cars, have I? Yeah. Do the inflict need to be in a K car? I'd rather take the Recon, so the inflict can come in something else. Inflict can come in a buffle, because I really don't care. Back to Recon. So I want to bring the Pathfinders in a K car. I'm bringing in elites. I'm going to bring in SAF snipers in a cheap chopper. So just the Puma, cheap as possible. I like getting these around behind the enemy base, because if you get them then they don't get seen, they can do some real damage with that rifle. Doesn't always work out, but it can do. And then trackers, cheap and cheerful, right up the front lines in a buffle. Or do you go for 20-point ones? I kind of want the speed. No, because I've got the... I kind of want to bring those in as well. Power Pathfinders are something you can leave in a town and they will defend it because of the frag launcher. It's not the best weapon in the world, but it's helpful. It does a lot of damage to enemy infantry. And they have 10, yeah. So I'll bring those in a SAML. Just so I have really cheap ones that I can bring in after the fact. So these guys at the start to be fast. These guys later as backup. I've got 1 point left there. Rover, small, very good. I don't know. I'll leave that point spare. I might come back and stick some more trackers in there. Let's come back to that. Vehicles. You don't get a lot of choice here. The ferret with Milan. I'm not really bothered about either of those. I'm really not. I'm going to take the Ratel ZT3 just so I've got something in here, because it's only 1 point. We've got loads of room in here, but we just don't have access to much. 8 veterans. The better the accuracy for these guys, you know, the better it's going to be against tanks, and that's what it's going to be used for. Sitting in a bush line somewhere and taking the odd pot shot before it gets blown up. And then the Rover 106. Poor range. I mean, the only thing really here, just for its slightly better range, is the Ratel 90. It doesn't have any stabilizer. But just to have something else in there, I think we'll go with that. Might provide good infantry support when you're defending a tree line. That's about it. Helicopters. Rui Volk is very good. Too hardened. I don't very often call them in, but if I was going to, that's what I'll call in. It's got anti-air, it's got anti-ground, it's got a good cannon. Then you've got these two. So you've got 90 points, which is anti-ground with rockets, or you've got 70 points, which is anti-air with rockets. I'm going to stick the anti-air one in there, because there are occasions when I really wish I had an anti-air chopper to take out other choppers. So 5 hardened of those. I wouldn't really bother with this one, because I've got the Rui Volk to do that, and yes, it's 30 points more. And you miss out on the rockets, but that's got more rockets anyway. So I think I'd probably stick with getting just save up for a Rui Volk if I needed that. I'm tempted to stick the Alouette K car in there because of the cannon. It's not a great cannon, but it's got an AP power too, and it would be very annoying if you got that up against some enemy vehicles and they didn't have any air defense with them. How often is that going to happen? Probably not that often. Let's leave that and come back. Aircraft for South Africa is a bit of a pain in the arse. So the problem is, if I click on the Carver, for example, you got the V4 R Data. It's fire and forget, which is great. You get 2 missiles. But the problem is this. Its range is only 7,000, compared to everybody else who gets 7,700 for the most part. But the Carver's the best you get, so you're going to stick 2 hardened ones of those in. The Buccaneer is cheap anti-ground with 4 missiles. Doesn't really have ECM or anything. Your choice is there if I just switch to anti-tank only. That's not the only choices, there's more than that. Maybe it's under multi-role. Yeah, there. So you also get that as an option if I pin that. So you get the same weapon as an option on the Mirage, which obviously can act as a cheap fighter as well, but the problem is it only gets 1 missile. So it's going to come in, fire that 1 missile at a tank, miss, and that's it. At least you get 4 with the Buccaneer. My thought is here, yes, it's 90 points, but if it comes in and takes out a 140 point tank, then it was worth it. 2 veterans of those. Bring everything back in. Now, the Cheetah D2, because of that bomb, or the 2 guided missiles, whatever you want to call them, it's just, yeah, definitely. They're huge amounts of damage. It does have anti-air as well, so you can use it as a bit of a fighter, but that's not what I'm bringing it in for. And then, otherwise, I mean, the other options, I mean, really? You're talking about, like, the Cheetah C, because it's the only other one with 7,000 meter range. We don't have any anti-air there, do we? It's the Cheetah D with Seed. I say anti-air, I meant anti-radar. So Seed is the only option. It's pretty cheap, 2 hardened to those. And then you've got 5 points left. And you could go for a Cheetah C. Air detection's exceptional, much like the Carver. The Carver's better, it's 10 points more. For me, I'd just bring in the Carver. Let's unpin that unit. Cheetah C, stick Carver as well. It's got the same missile. The Carver's got a slightly better secondary missile, and the main cannon is the same. No, it isn't. That's interesting. The main cannon, it's twin. That's got 2. That fires a lot faster because it's got 2. Oh, that's interesting. Are you going to let them get that close that they're going to fire those cannons? Not if I can help it, honestly. But then again, if you're getting into this range, the darters. Good question. Let's leave it as a Cheetah, the Carver even for now. I'll have to have a think about that one. And then the other thing I would take is the Canberra. Or Canberra. The point of this one is having a carpet bomber of some description. It's 110 points. It's got 0 ECM. It's got strength 15. It's got a speed, which isn't great. It's air detection. Basically, this is probably going to die unless you know that the enemy don't have any anti-air there. The idea is you're trying to kill more than it's worth, which doesn't always work, but it's the only real carpet bomber you have with that kind of payload. There's nothing else that has anything of that quality. You can bring napalm bombs if you want. So I'm going to go with that and take 2 trained. I need to have a think about the Cheetah C and the Carver. I wouldn't really ever want it to get close enough to fire those cannons though. But it does make you think. It does make you think. And then Navy, we'll just click on quickly. So Navy, all I want to point out here is you can take whatever ships you want. But let me just deselect everything. There we go. Aircraft. Aircraft. There we go. You can have a Tomcat because you are playing as Blue 4. So stick and elite one of those in, and then because I was also complaining about range on anti-air missiles, I'd also stick the Super Hornet in there. It's really expensive, but it does at least have that 7,700 meter ARAM. So, you know, when push comes to shove, it's a very good plane. It's got very good ECM, exceptional air detection, speed, blah, 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 blah. Nothing wrong with that at all. Turn radius, 400. That's something I should check on those other aircraft, actually. So the Carver has a turn radius of 300, and the Cheetah C is also 300. 6 and 2 3s. Fine. So I've got 2 points to play around with. I might, let's see, no room there, no room there, no room there. Tanks. Why do I have 1 point? Here, really. And Recon. Do I take more Recon? Recon can make or break a game. So having more cheap Recon isn't necessarily a bad thing. Maybe it'll teach me to bring in more cheap Recon. I don't really want to spend those 2 points on another helicopter because I'm not going to use them. I'm more likely to use more Recon. I could have gone for a rover, I suppose. Just for the whizzing about speed. Nah, probably not. Oh, this is very cheap. It's the same price as those, but at least they've got a weapon and they're coming in a vehicle with a weapon. Stick with that. And then I've got 1 point left. Where do you spend it? Vehicles? Do you buy something really cheap just to be annoying? I mean, it outranges infantry, so it could still be annoying. It does have some AP power. At least it has a bit of armor for 15 points. Oh, let's stick it in. I might never call it in. I might do, and it might just be a little bit of harassment for anti-little vehicles, anti-APCs. Its accuracy isn't great though, but we'll see. Maybe it will please me. Fine. So that's the deck. I won't bother adding more to the navy. Let's click back. So, quick run through: infantry commander, fob, chopper fob, or supply chopper. The Samuel 100 cargo, which you get 6 of, and the Samuel 50 cargo, just because I want something cheap that I can call in when I'm in dire straits and don't have any points in a 10v10 tactical. Buck up 90s and Rattle 20, Casper K. I'm bringing in lots of vehicles that have autocannons, Rattle 20 being the better one of the two. Buffaloes in the K car, Buffaloes 85 specifically. Milan's just because having some cheap anti-tank is great. Bring them in Rattle 20 so the Rattle 20 can support the troops. Parabat 90s. SAF 90s because they're absolutely fantastic units. Stingers just because I like to have a cheap harassment unit in the back line. And then Inflict, which I'm conflicted about. And I might remove them and add some more sort of frontline fighting infantry. Support, Cactus, Rui Cat for radar, Ratel 120, Mortar, Valkyrie just because I want to try it. I don't think I'll ever call it in, but I might try it at some point. Bosvark just provided a little bit of harassment and base defense. Tanks, I don't use many tanks when I'm playing in South Africa, but Oliphant Mark 1B, just for decent armor, a little bit of support for the infantry. Rucat 105, again, a little bit of harassment, very fast moving, very accurate, good damage. Loads of recon. I want to use more recon. I use quite a bit of recon when I can, but I just want to use more, and I wanted more options for cheap recon in this deck. I've also gone for the chopper with the cannon, so I can potentially use it to whip behind enemy lines and take out command vehicles. Rui Cat, because at least it's a bit of armor in terms of a recon unit. Parapathfinders, SAF snipers. I like getting them behind enemy lines, hence they're in the chopper, etc, etc. More trackers, Parapathfinders and trackers. Vehicles, there's not a lot to choose from. I took the Rattle ZT3A1 because of the anti-tank missile, and at least it provides a little bit of defense sat in some bushes. The Rattle 90 just to, again, a little bit of support in bush lines for infantry. The Ferret, a cheap harassment unit, just again, provide a little bit of support to infantry. The Revolk and the anti-air chopper are my choices in Helo. And then for planes or aircraft, the Carver, just my preference. Anti-tank, Cheetah D2 for your version of a Nighthawk, as close as you're going to get. Cheetah D for seed, because it's the only option. And then something with a little bit of carpet bombing capability, but certainly nothing compared to other sides. Then naval, I've just stuck the Tomcat and the Super Hornet in there, just because it's just longer range, air to air. Not that you're going to be on naval maps much, but it's just an option. Well, that's the end of the video. Thanks very much for watching. I hope this was helpful. What do you think of the deck? What would you change about it? Let me know in the comments down below. It's always interesting to see what other people think. Again, this is for a 10v10 tactical, so it's a low point game. That's why there's not a lot of commanders in it and things like that. But otherwise, you could adjust it and take some things out and make it suitable for games where you have more points. Anyhow, thanks very much for watching. Please do like, share and subscribe. Stay tuned for what is going to be probably a few more Wargame videos coming up, and then we'll slowly transition into Warno, I expect, unless it's a huge disappointment when it comes out. But that remains to be seen. Have a great weekend, everyone.